All right. Thanks, Fotnell. Thanks, everyone, for coming. So we've already covered who I am. I'm Jared. I am a product owner and a technical writer, moonlighting, because there's no one else, at Ladbrokes Digital Australia. Ladbrokes are one of the top-tier betting companies in Australia. So I'm here today to tell you a story of sorts. A story of how we got a hackathon project for embedded help to a production system that people use today. But as with every story, it starts at the beginning. And the beginning is actually before I even joined Ladbrokes. And that was at Red Hat. So what you see here is about an hour and a half's worth of whiteboarding with Don Domingo, who some of you will know, who is an awesome guy, and he was kind enough to share with me his vision for the product that he was working on. His vision was that he wanted to get a basic level of embedded help into his product, but because of project deadlines, he just couldn't quite get there. So in the spirit of open source, he shared his ideas with me, and we decided to talk about the moonshot solution, I guess, about what we would want to do if we could. And what the scribbles tell you here is that we want to design a product which was codenamed Hawkula, which, if you have a look online, has one of the best logos I've seen for a long time.
What's it called?
Hawkula. Hawkula. No, Hawkula. It's a JBoss messaging server, but the next version, Josh. I think you did some docs for it while you were there. So, we wanted to create both the upstream product and the enterprise product with embedded help from the outset. Not tacked on, not thought about afterwards, but from the outset. The idea was that we were going to have a conditional-based processing engine using field help and long-form docs featured in the product. We wanted to offer both types, so we wanted to actually do the microcopy inside the app as well as traditional sort of docs. We also wanted to, of course, being Red Hat, do it with open source tech, which we would have got shot for if we didn't. I thought it'd be good, since we're moving towards a AsciiDoc-based toolchain, that we actually use it as a test case for AsciiDoc, so we wanted to do it in AsciiDoc. We also wanted to put a bit of intelligence in it and flexibility, and this is where the mapping concept of it came in. We wanted to uniquely define the interface ID with a mapped document, and we wanted to have a fallback as well. So if for some reason there was a problem with the way we rendered the document, it would fall back to an HTML page. And the other cool part, which I was most excited about, is that on hover, we would actually live render the help using AsciiDoc.js and display it in a modal. So you could always have help when you needed it. So that was the original idea, and unfortunately it didn't really go anywhere because I left Red Hat shortly after pitching this idea to the business, of which they were very enthusiastic about. So, like all good things, I kept it in the back of my mind. I was going, right, an opportunity will come up someday. It turns out it came up about 6 months after I joined Ladbrokes. Ladbrokes do what they like to call a hackathon, but it's basically an opportunity for all the devs just to play around with really cool stuff they've been itching to play around on. The only brief is to make something that would benefit the company in some way, whether it's culturally or whether it's for the customers. So I thought, okay, cool. Well, at the time I was a technical writer. I was hired because they actually didn't know what a technical writer was. So they knew they needed one, so they got me, and I think it was overall a pretty good decision. They'll be watching this, so. So I thought, well, cool. What always happens in hackathons? Usually documentation is last on the priority list. So I thought, cool, I'm the docs guy. I'll volunteer to help any project who wants it to write readmes, whatever they want. Help them with their pitch. Cool. But when I said this to one of the senior people there, they said, well, have you got anything you'd like to work on at all? And I said, well, Yeah, actually, I've always wanted to have embedded help put into a product, and we have at Ladbrokes front-facing products which are accessed by our clients, but we also have a back-end management system which is bespoke. We've written it from scratch. It's a PHP product, but it too was developed when the company was first incepted in a very startup way, and because of that, there's not a lot of consideration for user support in the app. So I said, well, how about we do that? And I thought, I don't know how possible it is, but I said, let's explore it. So we came up with some ideas, but also a lot of challenges. So being that the product was created in a startup way and very iteratively, there really wasn't a lot of concept of unique IDs for fields or any sort of repeatable way to link into the product. As you would have seen with the previous idea that we had at Red Hat, it was all laid out nicely, but not so much here. The real challenge was that being a web-based product, the URL slugs were not uniquely identifiable. So the concept of, say, being on a page and then have like a hash identifier for a tab or an element on the page, there wasn't a thing. Everything was keyed to the very page itself. And in some cases, there was other information like client names and stuff that were tacked onto the end of the URL. So that pattern wasn't available. The other problem, as I've already brought up, is the fields just weren't uniquely identified or consistently. So even if we wanted to, say, use a YAML file or some sort of like light database to manage the fields, we couldn't because there was no way of doing it. So we came up with an idea. And this is, I guess, the Hackathon solution. So we wanted to drag and force an embedded help solution inside Manage. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term drag and force, it's a band, a metal band, that is incredibly enthusiastic about playing, but perhaps lacks a little bit of finesse in their play style. We also wanted to display rendered help in a new tab. We couldn't quite go for the embedded sort of concept, so the next best thing, just put it into a new tab when they click on the help button in the page. It'll work. It's not great, but it'll work. It's a hackathon. Oh, and you have 2 days. So off we went. So what's the minimum viable product or the MVP for this? We thought, all right, give users access to the docs inside the product. Don't have them go into Confluence, which is one of the other things we use at Ladbrokes to share ideas. Again, because I was fresh out of Red Hat, let's do it with open source. And also, too, because I was trying to drag and force ASCII doc into Ladbrokes as well. We want to make the content single source because that is the future. And it was a good idea because you can respin it into docs if the business needs it, which I have had to actually do as part of the process. And we want to make everything as atomic as possible, so we can try and get it to like an every page is page one type of structure, and with links as best we can in the product. And the biggest thing for me that I liked about the Hawkula solution was that we were going to separate the docs releases from the code. So at any time I could write content and it would be available if there was a matching page. So the technology, we've covered it a bit. It's ASCII Doctor for the source content. Chose Middleman for the static site builder because it works pretty well with the framework that ASCII Doctor uses, which is Ruby. And a cool little static site framework that I found called Franklin, which was kind of like a competitor to Read the Docs before Read the Docs got really popular. So, and GitLab on premise, because we like to keep everything inside the four walls of Ladbrokes, because the betting industry is highly competitive and very small in who knows who. So you have to be careful with that. So we wanted to use the URL matching technique because it was the simplest and we could smash it in 2 days. More than likely, theoretically. So we wanted the help pages named the same as a PHP page. So if it was an index.php, I write an index.adoc file, and that gets transformed into index.html, and magic happens. And we want a JavaScript button that just does all the logic in the client. So they click the button, and the page just opens up in a new tab. Again, magic. So to do this, we needed a watcher script. And the watcher script is basically that. If you're familiar with code, you'll see pretty much what it does. It's very basic. All it does is it clones a GitLab repository, and then it just lives in the app web root, just sits there because it's a hackathon. It's not very good to do that, but that's what we did. It watches for changes per the sleep interval, which I think when I was testing it, I did it every 30 seconds or something like that, because you can. And then it would sync the HTML changes to the web root docs directory, and it would load on click. So it worked pretty well. So we had everything lined up. We had it working. I'd written some help topics for it, and it was looking pretty good. But here's the hard part, the judging. We had to put this in front of a panel of the senior guys at Ladbrokes and the CTO. So,
no pressure.
I'll excuse the following screen. This is the only way I can demo this product to you. It's incredibly small and blurry for a reason, because it's, showing an internal system. So I'll run you through it. So you click the help button, and you get a navigation. There's a TOC there. You've got interlinks between pages. You can also navigate around using the links at the bottom, which is every page is page one. But, whoops. Well, it is hackathon quality, so it wasn't actually an engineering issue. Everything was working fine. I just forgot to put the link in right. So whatever. It's fine. This is fine. So I guess it's time to get the judging. It turns out that through the fire and the flames, we carry on. We were victorious. We were one of 3 winners chosen by the CTO. It was going to be 2, but he was so impressed with this idea and the way it was implemented that he actually added a 3rd category into it as well. It was 250 squids, which is pretty good. Happy with that. And the most important thing was that it was a huge boost in confidence for me, and also a bit of a surprise for the other devs, who weren't really expecting a docs guy to take out a hackathon. So, pretty awesome. So, we won. Well, we were one of the winners. Well, now, we've got a proof of concept. It works pretty well. So, can we get this released anytime now, real soon? The customers, my internal customers need this. They need to know how to use a product. There's no internal documentation for this. Probably time we started delivering that. So the answer is yes, we can do it. And the only way we're going to do that is to productize. So the process that we use to productize is pretty much the same as any big corporate organization. I broke everything down into documentation, of course, funny that. So documented how to do it. I made epic stories, tasks, all the usual planning docs that you need. And because I was moving into a product ownership role at that time, I thought, well, I'll use all those skills I've got doing all the years of technical writing to actually write really solid stories. So the developers know exactly what I want and how to implement it. So that was step 1. Then the people, of course, are the important part. So I worked with my hackathon engineer, who actually gave up most of his hack time to actually implement this solution for me. So if you're watching, thank you, Rich, to get this done. Without him, I wouldn't be talking to you today about this. So I've got a lot to thank for him. And then I actually worked really closely during the development phase with the developers to get it right and make sure it was behaving the way I wanted, since I was the stakeholder, I guess. So it was a lot of fun to do that, and it gave me a real driving passion for actually moving away from technical writing and away to product ownership, even though I still dabble in it a little bit. Now, the engineering side of things, well, that needed a little bit of cleaning up as well. So we had a self-signed RSA key that was using for access to GitLab, and that had to go because it was called document docface. And it was called that for a reason. Reach did that for a reason, so it would never make its way into production. So we got rid of that, and we decreased the sync tasks to once a day, because there was a fair chance I wasn't going to be writing help topics every 5 minutes or whatever I had the interval set to originally. And we tweaked a bit of the logic behind the help button to actually show different states. So if I hadn't written any help content, it would just be grayed out. And if there was a matching file, it would detect that and blue. So that's fine. So I guess the only other thing we can do now is ship it. So it was dev approved. It went through all the MR process, all that, everything checked off. QA had a good, strong look at it as well. There were a few concerns about how the JavaScript was going to interact with our dev environments, but they went, it's okay. Sucky docs, it's fine. So QA approved it, and out it goes. Released into the wild, people started using it. I didn't get a lot of feedback about it, but it's one of those things where you just put it out there and let it sit for a bit and try and socialize it internally and get people to know about it. So in hindsight, look, things work okay with it, but they've got to change because I'm going insane with some of the things I decided on initially. So the limitations with the system are that because it's direct URL matching, you've got to make sure that the help topic you're writing is a direct match to the file name. And it's got to be, because it's middleman and the framework that I've chosen with Franklin, it's all got to be in the source directory in a flat structure, because for some reason the version of middleman I chose didn't like to traverse directories. So I put up with that for a bit. As I said, you can't use a nested file tree, so I had to sort of invent this convoluted naming strategy so I could work out which ones were tasks, and file names were going like this. Trying to open one of those files in a terminal. No fun. We needed to change, if I need to change the destination HTML file, I need to change the logic for the help button. It was all hard-coded, tightly coupled. So if I wanted to move to another framework or another doc gen tool, I had to make sure it adhered to the same structure. And it turns out that's quite unique to the Franklin framework, the way that I provision everything. So I shot myself in the foot there. And the missing help files in dev, they kind of threw a few JavaScript errors in the dev environments, and developers were whinging a bit about it. It wasn't causing anything major, but it was enough to annoy them. I thought, I should probably really do something about that. And changing anything except content requires a code release and testing. So I'm beholden to the developers to try and fit it into a sprint cycle to do any improvements to this tooling. And that wasn't okay with me. I love developers. I know we have some in the room tonight, but business priorities make it sometimes really hard to get anything done. So there's not much you can do. So anyhow, looking towards the future, what I really want to do with the product is I want to realize that Hawkula dream of the config-driven docs. So I want to separate some of the hard coding stuff that we've got going on there and make it all config file driven. I also want to change the tooling at any time without impacting the help button functionality. So I also want to switch from Ruby to NPM, because Ruby was driving me insane, particularly in my environment. This is my work laptop, and I've got a dual profile set up so I can separate church from state, my work stuff from my private stuff, to meet the policies that I wrote. So I guess I should probably make sure I do that. So yeah, using Ruby, I've had some problems. It may just be me. I don't know. I might suck at Ruby. And because we're using GitLab on premise, I want to use GitLab runners to better automate builds. Aside from this presentation, the power of the runner infrastructure in GitLab is incredible. The side project I had working on was generating PHP docs for our entire code base. When I was doing it locally, it was taking me on this machine probably about 5 hours to do it. And it was turning this thing into an oven. But using GitLab runners and multiple Docker containers to do it, 30 minutes from start to finish. Incredible. And I sort of left it for a good 6 months because I became a product owner and they weren't going to backfill me. So I thought, well, there's only one of me. I can't do too much. So I want to concentrate on doing good product planning. So I had to step away. But what I want to do now is actually write embedded help at least once a week. Just do Friday as embedded help day and just chip away at the elephant trying to get it documented. There's a lot of pages in the product that need to be documented. So I guess it's probably time to think about the takeaways from this whole journey that I've shared with you today. I think the biggest thing I learned is during the hackathon, I found out that the developers, there actually can be your allies with documentation. Sometimes, depending on where you work, you may not feel that way, but they may even actually care about docs. So that was a surprising revelation to learn that there were people there who really did want to help me out and get things done. I think a really important thing is that DevOps get stuff done in the business, and they're worth having lunch with because a lot of the tooling and GitLab syncing and stuff like that was done by me knowing my DevOps guys and sitting with them at lunch, hearing their war stories and going, I know. The next one was being outside your comfort zone and putting yourself into a developer space can actually sometimes be comfortable. It's good to work with other teams in the business and learn how they do things and experience the way they do things. And in the process, learning the challenges they have by using the tooling infrastructure in the business. And there might even be some opportunities that you as a writer can help them procedurally and spell out some things for them. And the other really big thing that caught me by surprise is you can actually be an entrepreneur inside your department and think outside the box. Don't let your department scope dictate what you do as a writer. Some organizations are a bit more flexible and team size will make that a little bit hard sometimes. But you can still have a try because it doesn't hurt to try. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. These are all the ways you can contact me if you want to have a chat. I'm on Twitter, send me an email, or if you haven't yet joined Write the Docs on Slack, I recommend you do because it's an awesome community of writers who are passionate about what they do. It's a global collective, and it's not just writers, it's developers who write documentation, it's marketing people who write copy. So if you've got a problem, chances are they can help you solve it. So thanks very much for listening. Are there any questions?